In this video, you'll learn about the types of cells found in the epidermis and 5 layers of the epidermis. The majority of the cells in the epidermis are known as keratinocytes. These cells produce a fibrous protein, an intermediate filament protein that's known as keratin. You're familiar with keratin because that's what your hair and nails and the surface of your skin are made of. Keratinocytes grow from the deepest layer of the epidermis. They gradually fill their cytoplasm with keratin. This provides strength to the epidermis. Melanocytes are another cell type found in the epidermis. In the deepest portion of the epidermis, melanocytes produce the brown pigment melanin that helps protect from the damaging effects of UV sunlight radiation. Melanocytes have long extensions that contact the keratinocytes, and they transfer melanin to the keratinocyte. Another cell type shown in the illustration here is labeled the Merkel cell. Merkel cells are also known as tactile discs. These are specialized somatosensory receptors that detect changes in the shape of the skin in order to contribute to our sense of touch. Here we have a slide of thin skin that has been specially stained to allow us to visualize the Langerhans cells, the specialized leukocytes that are found in primarily stratum spinosum. We can see there are also some Langerhans cells scattered through the papillary layer of the dermis, maybe 1 or 2 in stratum basale. The majority of the Langerhans cells are distributed throughout stratum spinosum. The function of Langerhans cells, like other leukocytes, involves defense against infection. Remember that leukocytes are the white blood cells. However, they're not always found in the blood, such as these Langerhans cells are a type of leukocyte found in the cutaneous membrane or in the skin. They help defend against infection if you are cut. If the barrier of the epidermis is compromised, then the Langerhans cells are there to immediately recognize any pathogens and help defend against those pathogens, preventing an infection from spreading. The Langerhans cells can also monitor other cells in the cutaneous membrane that are part of our own body in order to help recognize if those cells are abnormal and can help to trigger a mechanism that will remove cancerous cells or abnormal cells that are not functioning properly. The epidermis is organized into distinct layers based on their appearance under the light microscope. There's a different histology. The most superficial layer facing the surface we see here is stratum corneum. The deepest layer, stratum basale. Thin skin covering the majority of the body only has 4 layers, but thick skin has an additional layer. Stratum basale is the layer that contains stem cells, which divide in order to produce the keratinocytes. Another name for stratum basale is stratum germinativum. This comes from the Latin word germinare, meaning to sprout, referring to the capacity of these stem cells to divide, producing keratinocytes. Melanocytes are also found in stratum basale, and the tactile discs or Merkel cells that detect
bending of the epidermis for touch are found in stratum basale. Stratum spinosum is superficial to stratum basale, and it contains large metabolically active keratinocytes. It's called stratum spinosum because it appears to have a spiny appearance, with each of the cells looking like a pincushion. This is because the intermediate filaments of the keratin protein are attached to desmosomes at the cell membrane. And when we prepare the skin for histology, the cells become dehydrated and the keratin proteins look like they're poking out of the cells, giving it this spiny pincushion-like appearance. The keratinocytes within stratum spinosum accumulate melanin granules from the melanocytes. There are also Langerhans cells found throughout stratum spinosum that help to defend against infection. Stratum granulosum is the next layer superficial to stratum spinosum. It's granulosum because it looks like it has a dark staining granular appearance. The keratinocytes in stratum granulosum are starting to break down their organelles, and their cytoplasm is becoming filled with keratin. They're also excreting lipid granules, helping to create a water-resistant barrier in the epidermis. The cells are starting to get the flattened squamous shape, and they're preparing to go through programmed cell death or apoptosis. Stratum lucidum is found superficial to stratum granulosum, but stratum lucidum is a layer that's only present in thick skin. So the skin that's on the palmar, palm of the hands, and the plantar, the sole of the foot. That thick skin contains 5 layers, including stratum lucidum, whereas the thin skin covering most of the body does not contain stratum lucidum. Lucidum means clear, so stratum lucidum is a layer that doesn't have any stain. It has a clear appearance. The most superficial layer, the layer that you're familiar with because you can see it on the surface of the body, stratum corneum. It literally means horny layer because the stratum corneum consists of keratin. The keratinocyte cells are dead and they're just filled with keratin in this layer. They're surrounded by glycolipids so that the epidermis can create a water-resistant barrier. Cells are constantly breaking off from the surface of stratum corneum and being replaced by new cells that grow up from the deeper layers. Each dead keratinocyte stays attached to the epidermis for about 2 weeks before they break off.
Here on the right, in the top, we can see a light micrograph of thin skin, where there's a much thinner layer of stratum corneum and no stratum lucidum layer in between stratum granulosum and stratum corneum. Below that, on the bottom right here, we can see an image of thick skin. Thick skin has much more exaggerated epidermal ridges and a much larger layer of stratum corneum, and an extra layer in the epidermis, stratum lucidum, is found in between stratum corneum and stratum granulosum.